So we're going to get started. We're going to, and the good news is our other speaker has landed. So, woohoo! We're going to have one person from each breakout session report on behalf of their group. And we're going to start with number 1, Classroom Reward Solutions, group number 1, to walk us through your discussion.
Okay, I'm Denise Zimmer, and I was the facilitator. We had an awesome group discussion on classroom rewards, and we just picked our top 4, but basically getting buy-in from all the teachers through education on reasons why using food for a reward is not beneficial to kids' health, and then that would be changing the mindset. And then second, just change it to active rewards. And we came up, and there actually is a handout in your packet that talks about alternatives to food as rewards, so you guys can all take a look at that. Third, just change to intrinsic motivators. We really need to get away from food as rewards. I think our group felt like we are rewarding everything these days, and so I thought that was good. And then we had a couple of high school students in our group which gave some good input. Making sure you ask the students what their ideas for good rewards are, especially the high school students. Our girls said just taking a walk outside around the block or on the river trail would be fabulous. So I think we need to, if we do continue to do active rewards, getting ideas on what they would like. Thanks.
Healthy vending options, group number 2. Come on down. And then just so you know who is next, group number 3 is off-campus lunch options.
Yes. Hi, I'm Tara Ray. I am a school nutrition specialist with the Office of Public Instruction, and I was one of the healthy champions in the healthy vending section breakout. What we came up with is that if vending machines are going to be in our schools, specifically and typically middle and high schools, the only option should be healthy options, so that the choice isn't really there to make a bad choice. We had a really unique and interesting idea to have a sample night of try it before you buy it, so that when you're bringing in these healthy options, maybe at athletic events or a health fair or like student council meetings, getting buy-in again from the students, so we'll echo that from the first group, where parents, teachers, students, everyone has access to trying these new healthy options that will be available. And then we'll plug the $2,000 mini grant, that maybe you could create a health fair to do that. And then improving access to healthy vending machines. We had an idea that now debit and credit cards are usable at vending machines, so potentially that could go towards EBT so that it's available to all socioeconomic levels, and maybe even trying prepaid cards for students so that parents' charge accounts aren't totally shattered. So anyway, that was our idea.
Hi, I'm Andrea Vanetta. I'm a pediatrician in town and promoter of the 5-2-1-0 rule, which hopefully you'll be hearing about more in your schools, geared mostly toward the young kids, but just about healthy living in general. And there's brochures everywhere. But I help to facilitate the off-campus options for kids and how to make that healthier. This really is, geared more toward the high school students, and it's a tough one. But we did come up with some good ideas and had some good discussions. So the first one, which isn't surprising, is basically creating a 21st century cafeteria. So our kids are not, they're not geared to staying on campus when it's crowded, when it's dingy, when there's long lines. And so some of the ideas specifically were like, plants in the cafeteria, music playing that they like, creating more of a food court. Apparently Glacier High School just, was built recently, and it's just a beautiful place. So our kids aren't going to stay on campus when it's unappealing. And then secondly, the quality of the food, and I'm not sure how this can be changed, but clearly, again, if they're getting prepackaged meals, hot lunches, no availability of a salad bar, they're not going to want to stay there either. So we do need to increase the quality and just what the food tastes like and its appearance. Finally, we thought, the majority of the kids in our school district are leaving. 75% of kids are leaving campus, and whether it is because the cafeteria is too crowded or that's their chance to get off campus. And so how can we incentivize them to make good, healthy choices? I think this is a tough one, but there were a lot of great ideas around. The one that we decided on was maybe if they can bring proof of where they've gone to make a healthy choice, maybe the receipt with what they bought on there, and then somehow that be rewarded back at school. I think along these lines too is just creating more open space so that if kids just happen to bring their own lunches and then can stay on campus in an open space to eat it is also incentivizes them to stay there. So thanks.
Okay, my name is Linda Simon. I work with the school district, and I was the facilitator for the school store and concession group. And we had a lot of different ideas, as I'm sure everyone did, but we took off the top 4 winners for votes. And the first one was increased nutrition education, just really supporting having a full curriculum of nutrition education that teachers are educating, and just much more education on nutrition. The second one is, I'm sure everyone is healthier choices, just simply making more and more healthier choices, having more healthy choices available. Third is to align the curricular ideals, so our ideals of good nutrition, with the fundraising ideals. So basically finding some common ground between that rather than more of a divide. So really aligning the purposes of both of those things together. And then a big one that came up too was improving facilities to increase the prep areas to have better options by having better prepability. And so that's somewhat like increasing the cafeteria choices as well, but this would also be for school stores and concessions.
Classroom celebrations. Who is our classroom? Oh, Miss Heidi.
Hi, everybody. My name's Heidi Wallace. And I had the honor of facilitating. Yes, you're perfect. Classroom celebrations. We had an awesome group and amazing conversation. Our actions and key takeaways were around education, really opening the lines of education from the top all the way down, sending letters home, sending food choice lists home, even creating classroom or school recipe books with healthy choices, and using newsletter and Facebook as a means for sharing ideas and really getting folks involved. The second was celebrating in new ways. So having pajama parties or having open gym time, guest speakers, board game sessions, and educational movies. And the third is just creating a whole new culture and climate at school around celebrations. Build new traditions that can celebrate health and fitness and nutrition in new ways. And that could include family fitness night, smoothie parties. One great idea was having seasonal celebrations. So in the fall, instead of having Halloween parties, having a fall celebration with cider and pumpkins and fun stuff like that. And really with all the conversation, it was, let's listen to the young people, let's get them excited, let's hear their ideas. So thanks, group.
And fundraising.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Gochi, a school wellness coach with Montana Team Nutrition, and I assisted with facilitating the fundraising group. And our top 3 ideas we came up with was the first one being collaboration. So not only just working together as a school wellness committee, the PTA, but just extending that out to the student groups, as well as even going to different schools in your area. So working together as an elementary, a middle, and high school so that you're not hitting the neighbors up and family all at once. As well as choosing made in Montana products, kind of looking more towards your local suppliers or producers. That way you're keeping your money right there in the community and choosing those products that support your local agriculture. And then the third one would be working together with concession stands, whether that be school stores during the day or concession stands at athletic events, and working towards offering healthy choices, possibly starting off with sampling foods and choosing those that are going to be more profitable but still healthy.
Wow, I am impressed with all the ideas and work out here. We are smart, we are creative, and we can think outside the box. This is cool. So what I want to let you know is what's going to happen after today. So after today, I'm going to collect all of your great work and put it together in a document and send it back out to you so you can see the work that we've done. It will also be posted on the Let's Move Missoula website, and MCAT is recording as well, so we'll have that posted for those that could not attend today either. So then after that, we are going to reconvene with Graduation Matters Missoula Student Wellness Subcommittee and talk about an action plan and what that looks like. So we'll be communicating with the attendees as well as the principals about what our next steps will be to have optimal healthy choices in our schools with these breakout sessions that we discussed today. So thank you. Right now we are going to collect name tags. So if you can start passing your name tag to the end, Steve and Heather will collect them. And then we have a few door prizes, and our keynote is on the way, so I'm wondering if we should do our door prizes now, Susan. Okay.
So door prize is almost as important as parking. So we have from Great Harvest Bread Company, the Bread of the Month Club. The winner will get 1 free loaf of Great Harvest bread of your choosing every month for a whole year. Piper Wolferman. A $20 gift certificate to the Good Food Store. Julie Lester. A 1-month family membership to the YMCA. Woohoo! Jenna Hollenbeck. Jenna? Oh. Amanda Andrews. She works there too? Who here doesn't work? Kelsey Zomer? Yes.
We'd like to make it
A year membership. Woo! Kelsey Zomer? Yes? No? Yes. Okay, wonderful.
And Kelsey is a very hardworking MSU student nurse intern. So, thank you. Why? This is a goodie bag.
A goodie bag from the health department. There's so many things I could say about that. But I won't. A gun lock. A hypodermic. No. A stress elephant. A pedometer. A first aid kit. Water bottle. A ruler. Etc. And the lucky winner is Aaron Karlstrom. Woo! Well, clearly we saved the best for last because that thus endeth the drawing for prizes. So do we know the arrival plans of our speaker any moment?
Okay, everyone, don't rush out. We're going to do a really fun activity. This is another catch activity, and some of you might have already played this because it is so popular here in Missoula. And it is a math squat jump game. And so what we need is a very, very brave volunteer to come up here. And your job's going to be the easiest, trust me. We have a volunteer?
Get it, Levi. Levi!
Okay, so the rules of the game is what we're going to do is there's going to be a math problem. And what's your first name?
Levi.
Levi. Okay, there's going to be a math problem, and Levi is not going to see the math problem, but everyone here will see it. So you cannot look behind on this white pad. You have to place your eyes forward. So if you can just make that really big so everyone in the back can see it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to all know the answer. Levi is going to say a number, 0 to 100. We're going to give Levi the answer by the movement of our bodies. If he needs to guess lower, we're going to squat. If he needs to guess higher, we're going to jump. And when he guesses the right answer, we're going to applaud. Does everyone understand? Okay, stand up.
Three. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Keep guessing.
We'll go with 10 again. 7. 5.
Okay, hang tight while we get another math problem. Yes, it is the answer, everyone. Okay, so this is going to go 0 to 2,000. We want you guys to sweat on this one. Can everyone see this? Can everyone in the back? Can you tear that and hold it up or walk it up? Just a few more minutes, Levi. Your nightmare will be over. Okay, can everyone see? Did everyone see that? Okay, here we go.
1,000.
Okay, we're going to do another math problem. Hang tight. Okay, this is going to be 0 to 2,000 still. Can everyone see that? Okay, here we go, Levi.
1,000. 500. 10. 50. 100. 250. 300. 400. 450. 470. 499.
Okay, here we go. We're going to try it one more time. Okay, same 0 to 2,000 still.
1,000. 500. 250. 300. 350. 325. 330. 345. Again? 345? 343. Nope. 342. 341. 340.
I have a new rule. We're going to do one more, but if it's high, you have to do it the opposite way, and you have to keep squatting. So it's reversed this time. And if he's low, you have to keep jumping until he says a new number. Okay, so it's going to be a little more difficult. You're going to have to think now.
Okay, let's try this brain warming activity. Zero to 2,000.
1,000. 500. 250. 300. 275. 260. 250. 255.
No, we're doing it the opposite.
256. 257.
Yeah, because we messed up on
260. 270. 280. 275. 274.
Okay, and you guys think how challenging this was for Levi as well to do the opposite? So good job, everyone. I hope you had a good workout.
Hello. So those of you that don't know me, I'm Heather Davis-Schmidt with Missoula County Public Schools. I'm Executive Regional Director and co-chair of the Graduation Matters Missoula Student Wellness Subcommittee. I really want to appreciate all of you being here today. We have tried to extend the opportunity for our keynote speaker to get here as long as I think we can. And unfortunately, she has not arrived yet. So I think we're going to have to go ahead and let you all go. We are sorry that she is not here yet and that she's not able to join us this morning, but we really do appreciate you being here. If you are signed up for continuing ed credits, they will be available to you at a table outside here, whether they're early childhood credits, OPI renewal credits, or registered dietitian credits. So you can stop at the table and pick up your certificates.
Heather?
Yes, Tom?
Is there any chance that she'll get here in time that it can be videotaped so we can pick it up later?
That's a great idea, and if there's a possibility of doing that, we will make that happen. So, thank you.
I have a special gift for somebody special, and that would be, don't go away, this person, Heather Davis-Schmidt. And I co-chair the Student Wellness Council for Graduation Matters Missoula, Student Wellness Council with Heather. And I've gotten to know her very well over the past 6 months, and I'm so impressed by her leadership, her passion, and her energy. We've gotten a lot done. And I want to thank you for everything that you do for our kids in Missoula.
Thank you, Lisa, too.
And thank you all for coming. I want to thank all of our sponsors. This wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. So thank you, Missoula. Go team.
I'm Jessica Donzie Black. I direct the Kids Safe and Healthful Foods Project for the Pew Charitable Trust and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And it is with my sincerest apologies that I am not your kickoff today, but indeed your send-off for those of you that aren't already in your car and gone. We will try to make it worth your time to stay for an extra 40-ish minutes as things go. I won't blather on indefinitely, so that if you were thinking you get a few minutes at the end of your time, those can still be available to you. But the goal when we were going to talk first thing in the morning, and I think still rings true today, is to help people feel somewhat inspired and empowered to put forth a lot of the positive energy and a lot of the conversations and discussion you had here today. So as you were talking about classroom reward solutions and healthy vending options and off-campus lunch issues, that then, you know, in here it's great because you're talking to people who are on the same page. They showed up. That's a good sign. But when we get outside this world, how do we keep that energy going? How do we keep that motivation going? What might we run into? So that's sort of the big picture as we move forward. I am going to attempt, ta-da, it worked. So setting the context for this, and this might be a little bit for the choir, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but it will at least give you a sense of how to frame the argument to others if you need to. And I always am happy to make slides available, and you can change them to whatever you want them to be if that's helpful to you, because I know a lot of people then go forth and have to talk to their school, to their wellness council, to their school board, whoever it might be. So please feel free. As has already likely been discussed, and in not just this meeting but many, we're in the midst of a pretty severe epidemic, both an obesity epidemic and a food insecurity epidemic. So these two worlds interact in what we sometimes call the obesity-hunger paradox, that some of the people in our society who are most at risk for hunger also have the greatest risk of obesity. And so thinking about how we can solve those problems somewhat mutually is really important to our agenda moving forward. For those of you who haven't seen this, and I apologize to all the public health people who have seen it 43,000 times, but just to give a visual for how quickly this problem has increased, I like to run through the CDC slides on this. This is 1990, so I skipped the first 10 years of slides. But starting with 1990, as you can see, most states either had less than 10% of people with obesity or 10 to 14%. Every time you see a new color, that's a new 5 percentile being added. If we just flip through annually, you start to see that color change. Now there's a new color, right? Because now, oh, new color, keep going, and that's annual. Every year, that's how fast it's going up. Until we get to where now you'll see Colorado in 2008 was the last state that had 10 to 14%, which you'll remember from the first slide was the high rate of obesity in the country. Get to 2009, 2010, even Colorado's gone. And now we've moved into a completely different color continuum, all the way up to states with greater than 30% of their residents struggling with obesity. So from a disease perspective, from a public health perspective, that is an incredibly fast increase, and something that is no surprise it's going to take significant effort and culture change to turn around. We don't have a drug for this one. We can't immunize. Whereas that's what we do if it was an infectious disease, right? So we've got to almost think on those immunization levels societally, as a culture. How do we immunize our next generation against this? What is that going to take from an environmental perspective? And if we go in with that attitude of urgency, making some significant changes makes a lot more sense than thinking like, that's extraneous, we have other things to think about. So moving forward, why nutrition in schools? Kids eat in all kinds of places. Why are we so focused on what's happening in schools? Yes, families are important. Yes, communities are important. But kids get half of the calories they eat in the day at school. And we now have good research to show, because enough people have made changes over enough time and have done evaluations, that even if we change just that school environment and we don't manage to change anything else in their environment, it works. We see less weight gain over a 3-year period in quantitative measures among kids who live in states with stronger standards for the foods that are sold in their schools. So it isn't just because it's a good thing to do, which it is, or because it's educational, which it is, but it's also because this works. This environment genuinely matters to the kids who are in them. And if we can help fix that environment, not only can we set them on the right track from an education perspective, but it also actually can make a quantitative difference in the nutrition they receive in the course of the day. So another piece of the puzzle, the other side, because often when we're talking the school environment, one of the immediate pieces of pushback is like, listen, we have enough. I have to make sure people's math and science and reading scores are up to par. And that's a full-time job, and you're absolutely right. And you know what's going to help? If you have healthy students sitting in those seats. Everybody gets this at test time. Every principal in the country sends a letter home right around test time that says, parents, next week is test week. Please make sure your kid gets a good night's sleep and eats a good breakfast before they come to school, right? Turns out that same good night's sleep and good breakfast is actually really important to them learning the stuff in the first place that they then have to do on the test. So if we actually have kids that are healthier, that are consuming a healthy breakfast on a regular basis, that are consuming healthy lunches, that are maintaining a healthy weight, their attendance is better, their focus is better, their trips to the nurses are fewer, and ultimately their school performance is better. And you know, if you don't believe me, because of course I advocate for these things and it's my job to tell you that, then listen to other people in the field. So this is Mary Ronan, who's the superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools. Cincinnati is not an outrageously, progressive community. We're not quoting often. People pull up, examples of things like Boulder, Colorado, and everyone says, yeah, but it's Boulder. Like, come on, right? Cincinnati, this is Ohio. This is the heart of the country, people. But they've worked really hard to improve their school nutrition environments, both the meals and the snack food environments, because they're complementary. They have salad bars in every school. They have breakfast in every school. And she will stand up and testify and say, we have seen an improvement in our test scores and in our academic performance as a result of these changes. And that is no small thing for a superintendent to say, given everything they're looking at and everything they're held accountable to. So, and lots of other examples like that as well. So, do we have to worry about it in Montana? I mean, come on. Like, yeah, the rest of the state, the rest of the country. But Montana's a healthy place. People ski, people bike, people walk, people eat natural foods, right? Well, maybe, but somewhere, depending on which population you're looking at and how you do the math, upper 20% of students are still suffering from overweight or obesity. That puts you lower than some states but still close to 1 in 3 students struggling with this. But perhaps more worrisome is when we actually look at some of the details. So this is your youth risk behavior surveillance data. The CDC has the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance, YRBS for short. It's publicly available. Do it on an annual basis to assess what students are doing. It's self-reported data by secondary school students. And we're going to go through just a couple questions they're asked, just to give you a sense of, in general, are your high school students healthy? There's the question, right? There's the answer. So if you look really closely and you do the math, 70% of high school students don't eat 1 serving of fruit on a daily basis. Just in case that's not worrisome enough, let's look at vegetable intake. 80% don't eat 1 vegetable a day. 1. Anybody want to give me the recommended servings? Yeah, 3 to 5 of each in the most recent dietary guidelines. You're supposed to get 9 or more a day. Pretty much we all need to leave here and just start eating until bedtime to get all of those in, I realize. But nonetheless, more than 5 is usually how we frame it between the two. Less than 1, doesn't matter how you're doing the math. That's not okay with like 1970s guidance, let alone what we know in 2014, whatever year it is. Wow, they change quickly. Okay, and another one of the things we know really clearly is that breakfast consumption is closely tied to academics. Like that's one we have good research on, and that's one of the reasons school breakfast can be so important. But in this case, fewer than half of students actually eat breakfast 7 days a week, or even 6 days a week, right? We'll give them a weekend day off with the assumption they're sleeping till noon. But still, we're kind of in dangerous space. So we know we're not necessarily getting the nutrition that kids need. So what are we talking about when we're talking about school nutrition and what needs to change? A lot of this you've already talked about today, so you've already gotten into the details, which is great. We are talking about meals. Standards for meals were updated on a federal basis from the USDA in 2012. The great news is, as of June of this past year, almost all of Montana schools had already applied for their additional 6 cents reimbursement, indicating most Montana schools are serving healthier meals, which is fantastic. It's not to say there can't still be improvements, because everybody's always trying to make things more interesting, more engaging to the students, but nonetheless, they've done a phenomenal job at sort of raising that bar, which is terrific. But now there's the rest of the environment, that those meals often have to compete against things outside the cafeteria at other times of day that are sold from vending machines, from school stores. There's greater variability in this from school to school and across the state and across the country, but there are also updated standards that have been released on this arena that schools need to implement by this coming school year. So schools should be in the process of thinking about what are our policies and practices relative to a la carte, snack foods, things sold. The updated standards on a national level don't apply to what's served, and I think Katie talked about that a bit earlier today. So the other thing to think about in the context of all of this is taking a fresh look at sort of the rest of the environment. What we're doing in terms of marketing in schools, what we're doing in terms of fundraising in schools, that are all sort of part of this educational package that's moving forward. Rewards, I noticed people were talking about, kind of all of those other wraparound pieces. Is this really necessary? Maybe we've already fixed this, right? Maybe we don't have a problem. Well, I don't have Missoula-specific data, although you probably do in your head based on the schools that you are in. But we know that from a state perspective, only about 27% of schools actually have fruits or vegetables available in places that other snacks are. So when we talked about the thing kids need most, what they really need more of are fruits and vegetables. Yet typically when we're making snack foods available, we're not even making that an option. Hard to expect kids to expand their intake when it's not an option in the mix. So that's just a simple thing to think about. Before we even get into what we take away, it's more of a, gosh, what else could we make available? But about 40% of schools are selling candy of some sort, which is typically by most health standards not considered a health-promoting food. And similarly, about 40% still sell soda or sugar-sweetened beverages, which from a research perspective is the place we have the strongest data associating sugar-sweetened beverage consumption with obesity, which is why it gets so much attention, because it's something that doesn't provide any necessary nutrition and yet provides excess calories that we don't necessarily feel or compensate for in terms of what else we eat. So it tends to be excess for people. So can this be done? So you want me to serve healthy foods in all the venues in which I sell them throughout the day, the cafeteria, the snack bar, the school store, the vending machine, wherever else kids may go. Kids won't eat it, we'll lose money, kind of the common arguments that we hear, right? Well, lots of ways to look at this, but the number one way is to say, listen, other people are doing it. There have been literally thousands of schools around the country that have implemented changes and are still functioning. They're doing well. They've got students coming and learning and doing all the things they're supposed to do, and in many cases are doing better. Cincinnati, which I mentioned earlier, has actually seen increased revenue coming in. They're more in the black than they used to be, applying healthier standards. So we can learn a lot from those examples that are out there. These are just kind of case in points, but there are examples from every state. There are examples within Montana that are phenomenal examples of change. But do people really want this? Am I going to run into trouble? And when I go talk to policymakers, are they going to be concerned about voter perceptions and whether or not we're kind of getting outside of bounds? Here's the good news on this. This is something parents want a lot. And even non-parents want a lot. People kind of get it, that this concept of I'm keeping kids in school all day, they have to be there. It's an in loco parente kind of environment, right? I'm trusting the school that that is a safe space, that that is a learning space. No, that's a healthy space, just makes sense. So we did a poll a couple of years ago where we asked parents, are you supportive even of national standards? So even taking that on as not as sort of the risk of the local control concerns coming up. 80% of voters, parents and non-parents, say, yeah, that makes sense. Set a bar. Just raise the floor on this. We still want control locally, which updated national standards allow. So they say you have to at least meet this standard. You guys can do as much more as you want to beyond that on the local level, on the state level, but you have to at least get here. People are really supportive, and so if we engage parents in this, we tend to actually be more successful if we invite more people in. This also applies sometimes to overcoming the barriers. If we invite the community in to help us solve the problem, as opposed to saying, we can't do it because we have this problem, often they can help be part of the solution. There was a situation recently in a school district out west, further west of here, that really needed new kitchen facilities. And they were doing a bond issue in their district to do some other new facility changes, as many school districts do. And they were going to include a fairly significant amount of money for school kitchen improvements. And the people running the bond campaign originally said, but we're not really going to talk about that part because I think voters will think it's frivolous, and then we won't win the bond. Like, they'll vote it down. So the folks for it's a nonprofit put up some money to do some polling in the community and say, you know, if a new kitchen facility and kitchen improvements across all the schools such that students could have healthier, more appealing meals was included in the bond, would that increase or decrease your likelihood of voting for it? Hugely high numbers, it increased. That they said, yeah, absolutely, like that sounds something worth my money. And in fact, the bond passed with flying colors, and their number one sort of marketed reason to vote for the bond, help make foods healthier in our schools. So it's not something we have to hide from. It's something that people really do want, and we just need to bring them into that conversation and help them be part of the solution with us. So this one, and I'm not positive if we'll be able to make it work exactly. I'm going to try doing it from here. But one of the big questions we always get is, yeah, but times are tough, money's tight, can we afford this? And we actually did a health impact assessment looking both at the potential to impact student health in the school food environment, but also what the impact on the district and school financial health would be if we made these major health nutrition changes. And it comes out very clear when you actually do the quantitative assessment of district budgets over time when they've changed school food standards, that they actually stand to maintain or even increase revenue if you're fixing, so to speak, the competitive food environment, for that snack food environment, along with the meals. If you compete a healthy meal against not so healthy options, right, cookies and cakes and snacks and candy, the meal loses. But if you improve the rest of the snack food environment, one of two things happen. Either kids buy the healthy snacks, or they tend to buy the meal, which ultimately actually is much better for the children from a balanced nutrition perspective, but also for the school district from a budget perspective. And so that actually didn't make sense to reporters we talked to. And they'd say, yeah, but how can I sell less food and make more money? And we'd say, you're not selling less. You're just shifting consumers from one line to a different line where you make more. So what we tried to do in this infographic was to sort of help people to see that. I'll see if I can make it run for you. So there you go. So I send my kid to school with $250, or I put it in their debit account. They go to school, they buy a school meal. From a nutrition perspective, up in the corner, just a sense of what that looks like, to give a sense of the pros and cons. Might be a slice of pizza, low-fat milk, an apple, a salad, or some other vegetable. It's balanced. It costs $250, right? Next thing I do, unbeknownst to me, my kid decides just to shop on a la carte foods. So they get the same slice of pizza, but they get it with fries and some cranberry juice. Just thinking, that looks like food to me. Same $2.50 that I sent from my house, but I start to see a different nutrition picture, not getting as much of what they need, a little bit more of what they don't need. Or, better yet, my kid just stops at the vending machine, and they decide they'll call lunch a chocolate bar, some chips, and a sports drink, and spend the same $2.50, but from a nutrition perspective, actually getting fewer calories. So for the calories argument, our kids aren't getting enough food. They're actually getting less, but almost no nutrition in those calories either as we move forward. So from a nutrition perspective, the meal is obviously the best. But what about from a revenue perspective? And here's where the calculator comes in. If I send my kid to school at $2.50, USDA contributes another 48 cents between cash reimbursement and commodity food access. The school nets out with $2.98 for that meal. If my child shops on a la carte foods, the school gets that $2.50, but no additional resources. Same types of food. It took labor time, it took shelf time, took everything in the cafeteria, but no additional reimbursement. If my child stops at the vending machine, chances are the school turns around and gives half of that, or some portion of that, depending on the contract, back to the vendor, right? So that doesn't always work out in the school's favor. It is possible, mind you, in any of these cases, for things to work, but the budget doesn't play out the way people necessarily expect it to. And what school food service directors will tell you is that the higher their participation rate is, the easier it is to budget, right? That's the golden ticket. And so making the whole school environment healthy is actually sort of our key to success on that one. All right, so moving on. So how do we change the culture? If people's expectations are that I have to be able to sell these less healthy things to kids, how do I change that? One of my favorite questions I got, I was presenting to the PTA, to a national PTA meeting last year, and was talking about USDA's updated standards and how they needed to be implemented, and the fact that USDA had defined the school day as lasting until 30 minutes after the last bell. And one of the people raised their hand and she said, well, then how am I going to sell to students as they get on the bus? And I said, you're either going to sell them healthy foods or you're not going to sell them anything. And she said, well, that won't work. And I said, it's going to have to. Like, that's kind of the point, right? And then, and I thought to myself, what are they selling as kids get on the bus? Fast forward, I was meeting with a student who lives in my area, not my immediate school district, but in my area recently, and he was saying how they're working on this project to try to get things healthier because their PTA literally stands outside the school buses with pizza boxes. And as kids get on, they sell slices for $1 as they board the bus. And I thought, and this is to elementary, middle school. I mean, this isn't just high school students who could theoretically. So when I'm thinking to myself, I have 4 kids, poor things, all of them. I'm sure anyone would love to be adopted, so they'll let you know about that. But no, but and I'm thinking, what would I feel like if as my kid's getting off the bus, they're wiping the pizza sauce off their face, in 3rd grade. And I'm saying, what did you do? And it's like, oh, this nice lady at school who's like the mom who lives 2 blocks away, sold me pizza as I got on the school. It just seems kind of odd. But yet, that's the culture in some cases in which we live, and people consider it totally normative, and taking that away seems like we're being overly restrictive, as opposed to stopping and thinking, wait, you're selling something to other people's kids that the kids are excited to buy from you because they weren't going to get it for the kid themselves. Like, what does that look like? So just thinking about that, that shift, and how do we do that? So one important note is that as we work on policies, district wellness policies, and changing that work ultimately, when done, can be impactful because now it's the policy. But also in the process of doing the work, it can be really educational. And if we are inclusive and communicative about that work taking place, a lot of times in the process of doing it and even talking about these things, why are we making these changes? Why are we focused on sugar-sweetened beverages or other things? We're educating families on what needs to be done. There's been an interesting shift that's happened with the recent conversations around sort of food standards in different places, in schools, in some cases public spaces and other places. Even when the policies haven't passed, they've noticed behavior change at the consumer level. And a lot of times that tags to the fact that in the process of learning the policy things, it got them thinking. Like, oh, maybe we do need fewer fill in the blank, right? Maybe we do need fewer sugar-sweetened beverages in our family. Like, maybe we're doing that too much. Or maybe I should bring something different to class parties. Some research just came out that showed at the state level, if there's guidance, not requirements, but even guidance on things like classroom parties and rewards and those things that can be really tricky politically because people want the opportunity to make those decisions at the local school base. But even guidance saying, like, here's what we probably should be doing. Ultimately your decision, but here's what would be better. It actually has a major impact on the practices at the school level because sometimes people haven't thought about it. So being out there with these changes taking place is really important. Ultimately that policy can make a difference, but then the policy isn't the only thing we're trying to make a difference. We're not trying to fix things, we're trying to kind of move people. Identify and share success stories. This stuff is happening. It's happening here in Missoula, it's happening in other places in Montana and neighboring states. There are great examples that are out there, right? That you can actually go to, people you can talk to, who can come talk to you and say, we had that concern too, here's how we dealt with it. Or, yeah, that's a little tricky, but here's how you can overcome that. So make sure we're leaning on those success stories and making sure to raise them up. When we did some polling looking into kind of what helps people feel more comfortable with these changes, knowing that other people have done it is really high on the list. Like, I want to hear that this is possible and that I'm not doing something that's kind of off an edge here. So making sure that we're leaning on that. And you can find those success stories, you know, online at our website, online at the Alliance for a Healthier Generation website, the Robert Wood Johnson website, or literally, you know, in your community by talking to other people who work in this space, because you all know others who are doing this work too. So the other piece I think is really important is not being too Pollyanna about this. We need to acknowledge this isn't necessarily easy. There are some barriers. How are we going to overcome them? So we conducted a study last year that was nationally representative as well as state representative that looked into the implementation of updated school meal standards and the challenges that schools were facing in that space. The great news was that over 90% of schools indicated, we're going to meet the updated standards. We're going to do this. We can, we will. The other piece of news, though, is that 80% of schools said, or districts, it was the district level, said, but we have some challenges. And some of this stuff is pretty big. And we're using workarounds and we're making it work, but long term, we probably need some help here. So our focus as a project is a lot of kind of diving into that and saying, okay, what are those challenges? Those challenges are equipment, their infrastructure, their training, their technical assistance, their access to the right foods at the right price point. How can we make sure those supports are in place or help move forward on those things so they don't bring us down? So it's not saying, look, 90% of people can do this, you can do this, it's fine, it's easy. It's more of a, listen, we know it's doable, but there are going to be some challenges, so how do we work together to overcome those challenges? Bring me a problem, let's find the solution, not let's pretend there aren't problems, because ultimately that's not as productive. And then remember that youth are students and teachers in this process. That when we look at major public health changes we've made over time, youth are some of our biggest advocates and allies in some cases. You know, I always tease, try to get in a car with a 5-year-old and not wear your seatbelt. Like, it won't last long because they will be the first person to tell you that you have got to get that thing on, right? Or try to start and drive away when you haven't buckled them into their car seat. Not that this has ever happened to me personally. And they'll scream like, I'm not buckled, right? We barely need public health laws when you have 5-year-olds in the car. But that's because they have been raised in this world where that's the norm, that's the culture. And so to the extent we can bring them in, they can be our advocates. They will be our allies at school and at home. As we start out, you know, if this is what's normative from them in preschool and kindergarten and first grade and second grade, that can continue on. Youth had a major impact on our recycling in this country, on smoking cessation, on lots of things. So make sure we're working with them as we move the process forward. It sort of brings us to this kind of question of, who do we need to have at the table? And it'd be interesting to think about, you know, when you look back at the list of attendees, like, who was at the table? Or what other tables do we need to pull together to get people at the table at our school or in whatever our world is? And I would put youth on that list, because if we're doing it to them, that is not going to go nearly as well as if we're doing it with them. And sometimes that means student leaders, representatives, focus groups. It doesn't mean we necessarily make them come to all-day conferences, because they may just not consider that the way they want to spend their day. But it also means, you know, that we might be tying in bigger groups of students. We're keeping them posted on things in a more regular way. Teachers, club leaders, classes, other people who work in this space and who are going to have a really vested interest in where things land. Lots of people can be our champions if they understand what the changes are and if they are invited into the process so they can air the concerns they may have, and those things can be worked through. Obviously, administrators, school food service directors, school food service staff at the school. You know, I always say I think the woman who works in the lunchroom at our elementary school knows my child nearly as much as I do. and could probably tell me more about what he's doing on a daily basis than anything. So making sure those people have a voice in the conversation too, sort of your frontline people in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what kids are doing, what they're receptive to, and in recruiting them as sort of marketing the change is really important because they are the front line. You know, particularly in elementary school and middle school, they have a pretty major influence in what ultimately gets taken and consumed. And then community members, parents, sort of bringing in that broader audience. And have real conversations. Very often with these issues, we package them as sort of the stepchild, right? Come to the Wellness Council meeting, or come to this special meeting where we'll be discussing this, which we need to have in order to get sort of into the weeds. But then we tend to get a pretty either consistent or small group of people, or both, right? Who we know are interested, who want to be part of this, who have a background in it, or who have some special issue they want to make sure gets represented. We also need to take the conversation to folks who didn't necessarily self-identify as wanting to be involved, either because they didn't have time, they didn't even read the newsletter. People are busy, and they have a million other things pulling them. So to the extent we want to make changes, we want to include more people, we also have to make sure those conversations are happening in places where people are. So with youth, you know, classes, meal periods, have focus groups and taste tests and examples and whatever in places that they're in passing time, you know, in places that we can capture them more easily. If there's back to school nights or conference nights where parents tend to come at the school, those are great opportunities to have a voice for school food service. You know, I find it fascinating at back to school night so often how the teachers will be there, and often the PE teacher will be there, the librarian, other sort of key education people. Cafeteria is closed. It's totally unrepresented. There's no samples of here's what we're serving this year, here's what our menus are. Hi, my name's so-and-so, I'm in charge. I talk to your kid every single day. We don't even meet that person. And often they're not invited into that. From an administrative perspective, those worlds are a little bit separate. So just thinking about that idea of how do we connect parents to this process and get their input as we move forward. Club meetings are also really important. So what else is happening around the school? Who else is going to care and have an interest? And how do we invite them to be a part of moving things forward? With staff, getting extra time is really hard. So if there's a way to make time at staff meetings or teacher work days in order to provide the training or technical assistance or get the feedback we need, that's always helpful because asking people to do something sort of above and beyond obviously is challenging. And then again, acknowledging barriers, working collaboratively towards solutions, and leaning on those role models and samples of success and lifting them up, inviting them to be part of the conversation and tell their stories in order to help move people forward. Communication, more is better. Two of my favorite quotes from people I've talked to in the past year. One, no one likes change but a wet baby. And two, no one likes surprises unless it's money. So the idea being showing up at school, you know, first day of school in 2014, and every option in the vending machine is completely different than it was last year, not the ideal way to introduce students to change, right? They need to know that's coming. They need to be part of picking those products. They need to be looking at the huge list that human vending has available of all these accessible products and saying, ooh, I would eat that, I would eat that, ooh, no. Well, I might eat that if I tried that. Like, students are change averse, so are grown-ups. We always say like it's unique to them. It's not, right? They want to be a part of that process, and they tend to be neophobic. They don't necessarily like new things, and they're adverse to spending money on things that's a risk, as are grown-ups. So buying something at school, either as a meal or a snack or whatever, that I don't know what it is, or I've never tasted it, or I don't know if it's going to be good, is a pretty high barrier. But if I've tasted it and I know that I like it, or I think I could like it, or at least I know it's better than the other thing I was going to have, then you can move them along. So it's just important. Similarly with parents, the other thing is, you know, we're sending all those kids home as spokespeople, whether we meant to or not. They're going to go home and say what happened today. Sometimes that's very accurate. Sometimes not so accurate, right? It's really important that we are communicating with the broader community and with everyone about the changes we're making so that they can give their feedback directly and they're not getting fifth hand. Well, I heard that after this and that's happening and they don't allow this and now they're doing this and, you know, that's not actually true, right? But that's how the rumor mill goes if we're not doing the direct communication. So just thinking about that piece. And then really use social media. It's not expensive. It's pretty easy. It's a little bit of risk. Because often, you know, other people can comment and other people can weigh in, and that makes people nervous. Those of us who are used to very approved communications that have made it through all of our checks, and we put it out in the newsletter once a month, and it's done. But that's not how people get their news nowadays. They get it from Facebook and Twitter, and they see pictures on Pinterest, and they're looking at those things. So we need to be thinking about how do we feed into those conversations that are happening. If I'm rolling out a new menu, and I'm rolling it out on Facebook, then I'm inviting people to look at that in a whole different way and to engage in that conversation. I can do polling, and I can tweet about what the opportunity of the day is, and those things that often we don't think about in this space, but have been really effective for the people working in school health and wellness that have embraced them and used them to really grow their audience. That which gets measured gets done. So when we're thinking about the long term, think about what we're putting in place in terms of accountability, evaluation, transparency. Am I continuing to invite people into this conversation? If I'm setting updated policies, what am I doing to see if people are actually implementing those policies? How often am I looking at them to see if they're the ones that work, if we're seeing the outcomes we want to see, if we need to change things? So sometimes it can be as simple as transparency pieces. You know, everything that's, all the foods that are sold in schools will be disclosed, right? That they'll be online, and you can pull up a list and say this is everything your kid could possibly buy in the school day. Or it could be, if you want to get into some of the trickier things, like with rewards, okay, if teachers are going to use food rewards in their classroom, and one can decide whether they think that's good or bad, they just have to disclose that to parents back to school night. Like, here are the things I offer as rewards in our classroom. Sometimes that's enough to get that conversation started and move things in a different direction, or at least make sure that people are included in that conversation. But things, as far reaching as, can we put goals in our school improvement plans? Can we say that by X date, we will have implemented A, B, and C. We will have done these things to improve our school health environment, so that we're inviting some outside accountability. We're saying to the board, to the state, whoever it is that we sort of want to make that accountability with, this is part of our commitment to move forward as we grow. And you can do this. It's not too expensive. People often, that's the first thing everybody worries about. But the reality is, both from the research of showing that by increasing student participation in meals, we can compensate for any loss in sort of participation in snack foods. But also, if we're smart about how we're rolling out healthier foods, people have often found that they might see a slight dip if I'm switching, let's say, from sugar-sweetened beverages to water or non-caloric beverages. Often you see a slight dip at first while they acclimate to those new products, but then revenues get pretty close to what they were before, and we're doing the right thing. So we've sort of got that piece on our side. There are probably lots of things that are challenging in schools, right? Making sure everybody learns math and science and learns to read isn't easy. But we do it because it's part of the mission, because we need to do it. And we keep thinking of new creative ways to do it and how to better organize it, because we need to get there. And if we think of these things in that bucket, we can figure this out. We can get over anything. Too restrictive, there are literally hundreds of foods that will fit within standards that are reasonably healthy. If you use the USDA standards at baseline, there are tons of snack foods that are fruits or vegetables or whole grains or dairy products or proteins that are less than 200 calories, that don't have too much sodium or too much fat or too much sugar, and we can all feel pretty comfortable with our kid having one during the day. And that's really all this is. It's just scaling to those things that are going to help kids meet the needs they do have without getting excess of what they don't have. And if we think that's, impossible, well, I don't have time, I don't have energy, I don't have the people, let's look to those who have done it. And like I said, thousands of examples out there, and figure out how did they do it. We know it's not actually impossible, and none of those schools are so dramatically unique that I can't do what they did. So let's learn from it and figure out how to move it forward. And finally, my favorite pushback is always, well, kids won't eat healthy foods. And the answer is they won't if we don't give them to them, right? Parenting 101 is, if I want my child to make a healthy choice, I need to be offering them an array of healthy choices. If I say for lunch, do you want a pear or an apple with your sandwich? They're going to pick a pear or an apple. But if I say, do you want a pear or a cookie with your sandwich? Well, they're going to pick cookie, right? And so will a lot of other people. So why set it up so that we're trying to get them to make tough decisions, to kind of go against the grind across the age spectrum? Why not just set it up so that this one's easy? Every choice you can make is a healthy choice. And by doing that, I will not only be making sure they're actually getting the foods they need, but also setting them on a course in terms of their life and their long-term decision making that does shift their norm. so that choosing among those healthy options becomes normative for them and becomes what they look for in other environments. And if you want more information, please feel free to come to our website at healthyschoolfoodsnow.org, sign up for our action alerts. We'll keep you posted via newsletter and other things as it happens, but also my personal email is here. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to get your feedback, hear what's happening. We try to sort of keep in touch with where things are moving in the local world and also help you get in touch with those people that you need to in order to continue to move forward. So thank you for staying the extra time. I apologize for not being here at first thing this morning. And if there's anything else I can do, please don't hesitate to ask.
Take some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have questions?
Question. Yes.
Can you speak to the off-campus lunch issue for high school students? I know about 25% of schools still off-campus, and how can we make that healthier?
Yeah, you're right. 25% of schools nationally still do off-campus lunch opportunities at high school. And there are a couple of places I think that it's worth thinking about intervening on that. One is certainly it's worth it for districts to be thinking about, to the extent they're allowing that, why are we allowing it, and do we want to continue to allow it? In some cases they allow it because they don't have current facilities to accommodate because the high schools have been built or the population has grown where they say we have to let people go. That said, there are lots of reasons to close campus even beyond nutrition. In terms of safety and other factors, schools have actually found they do much better with closed campuses. So there's sort of that piece of the policy. But to the extent they're open, then one needs to think about what other foods are then accessible to the students outside, but more importantly, think about what we can do internally to attract them to stay. So what a lot of schools that have struggled with that have done is instead of thinking about, oh, this is so hard because they go off campus, I think, why do they go off campus? What is it they're going to eat? And the default often is like, well, then we should offer those things inside, right? We should contract out, and we'll just put up a food court that emulates what they would have driven to. But you can actually be more successful with sort of thinking more creatively and saying like, okay, students like choice. They like different things. So there's a food service director that I've talked to a lot who he has everything in sort of bars. There's the sandwich bar, there's the salad bar, there's the soup bar, there's the chili bar, you know, like there's your potato bar, and it's all different options and things. He also took the limited resources available and found some extra money and tried to really improve the cafeteria environment so it was in a more attractive place to stay. I know high schools that have put in booths, you know, so it looks more like an outside environment. They play music or they have other things going on. Some of it is, let's think about how we sort of attract them. You know, the food service director in Los Angeles often says that schools are the single biggest restaurant chain in the country that nobody realizes is. And if we think of ourselves in that frame, like, okay, I'm a restaurant and I have to compete with all those outside restaurants, instead of thinking of it as like, I'm going to lose, think of it as like, no, how do I win? Like, pull some people in who are just crazy competitive and see what we can come up with. And granted, budgets and all those things are challenging, but if you can get participation to go up, budgets go up. So I think that's really the place to focus, is kind of how do you attract them to stay? And then what is that going to take? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on that, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but I went to high school where there was a culinary arts program, and the students managed, they had a faculty supervisor, they ran a restaurant in the school. And the faculty ate at the restaurant, so why not expand that?
And in some cases it works. There are some food service directors who do work closely with their culinary programs in order to do that. It's actually been an interesting place of discussion because sometimes the culinary programs want exemptions to all the standards because they'll say, but we're learning to cook and we just need more flexibility. And we'll say, how great it would be if you learned to cook healthy foods. Like, you know, as opposed to saying, we're going to cook this stuff that. And so that's the only challenge you sometimes run into, is you have to get the culinary programs to embrace this idea of focusing on healthy food production and not just food production in its general form. But they can work with the school food service program to be part of the solution. Other questions? Yeah?
A question on the competitive guidelines, the school stores, the vending, and the a la carte lines. There's been some talk today of when those changes actually coming into effect. And you're saying a hard line change is difficult. So what are your suggestions on easing into that? Is there a time frame component to it? What's this?
Yeah, start now. So the USDA rolled out their updated standards last June. and gave schools an entire school year to implement them. Some schools officially, from a federal perspective, the new school year starts July 1, so that's why they did it in June. So it's the 2014-2015 school year in which the updated standards are required for all schools. So the intent of this year was to be the roll-in year. This is the year to be looking into new ideas, to be thinking about how do our current products align with what's going to be aligned, what other things are we going to need to do differently, where do we need to make changes. Like, now is absolutely the time to be doing that, so that theoretically by the time we open our doors in the fall, we're not necessarily doing everything at once. We're not making all those changes for the first time, but rather sort of just finishing up all of the changing we've been doing over the past year, if that makes sense. So if we haven't started, no worries, we still have 6 months. Yeah.
Well, I need to clarify that, just because I think from USDA, what our understanding is the final rule is not even out yet for the Smart Snack. And what our understanding is, once it comes out and it starts in the July 1, 2014, schools have a whole year to implement it. So I just know that's what.
Yeah, the interim final, and I think the reality is there's going to be some flexibility.
Schools to feel like in the fall, if they don't meet the standards, they get rid of all. I mean, because that's what people felt when the nutrition standards went in for school meals in participation. We don't want that with the Smart Stack. So to answer your question, you know, start working on it now. It's great, but if schools only start working on it in the fall, it's okay. Schools will have it.
Yeah, I think technically the interim final rule, you know, technically is required as though it were final. That said, there's no teeth.
They are thinking it's going to change, but until the actual law gets passed.
They probably aren't going to finalize the standards until after implementation starts, so that they can get a better sense of where the hurdles are. Because like with the school meals, like the protein and grain hiccup that happened, part of the challenge with that was the standards are already finalized. Then we implemented, then we identified a major barrier, and it's really hard to tweak a finalized standard. Yeah. Yeah, so their intent is, and that's why it's actually to all of our advantage to start moving on this train, because we want to identify where are, you know, where's the little tweaking needed? Is there the protein and grain equivalent in this rule, right? Where it's something that once we start implementing, we think, we don't really need that piece of the puzzle to do this, and yet it's creating sort of added burden. And for those of you that aren't in the weeds on school foods, don't worry about it, it's all fixed. So yeah, so the thought is make it interim final, which technically means we need to be doing it. That said, there's still a window of opportunity to tweak it, so we won't actually finalize until after the fall, but also we won't be figuring it into accountability necessarily this fall. So it isn't like day one, September, people are coming in to say, are you on track? It's just more like, this is when it's real. So we can't wait entirely until it's finalized, because the whole point is to finalize after implementation. But you know, we want people to kind of get on that train, if that makes sense, moving forward.
And so I think educating them that it's in their interest to get on the train.
Right,
that
right.
Voluntary compliance feels so much better than.
Totally. Absolutely. And the sooner the better with a lot of, I mean, schools that have had the greatest success, and in the survey we did looking, you know, asking schools sort of what have been your barriers or whatever, there's no question that schools who started early in the process were more successful making changes than schools who tried to do it all at once. So I think the sooner people start thinking of where are we sort of okay already, and where are we going to face challenges, and what do we need to be doing, is going to be really important. Yeah.
I wanted to know what you felt about the differences in grade level as far as, you know, high schoolers. I have high schoolers, and empowering them to make healthy choices versus mandating. I mean, I understand the school lunch program, but I mean, the open campus, they'll just leave. I'd say probably 30 to 40% of students have vehicles. So how do you empower them to make a right choice instead of mandate?
So the question is, how do we empower them to make healthy choices versus mandating it? I think some of it's in our framing, that if I'm actually offering, you know, less healthy options and more healthy options in the context of school, there's nothing about that that's empowering them to choose the healthy one, right? That's just saying, I'm kind of setting you up. Like, you can choose healthy, you can not choose healthy. Go ahead and get the not healthy, and then you don't have to drive anywhere. And I think from an education perspective, we have a bit of a responsibility in that environment that the kids are looking to us to say, you know, what's there. You know, we don't let them opt out of math, right? Like, it doesn't matter if they like it, they still have to take it. And there's sort of this sense of within school, it's not to say they don't have choices. They should have lots of choices so that they can try different things and find things that work for them. But making all those choices reasonable within that context, typically when we look at long-term impact, has more effect on them choosing healthier things. The other piece of the puzzle we need in there is obviously the education piece, that we can't just put the food out and expect everybody to know why these are healthier options than those are. So making sure that we're including that in other kind of curricular things are important too, but I think, you know, it's not so much that we're mandating any particular eating in school. It's just more that idea of we're setting them up for success. We're making it so that everything accessible, everything most accessible to them is within reason. And then certainly, any child outside of the school day may be choosing other things. What we do know, though, is if we do set up that school environment in a more healthy way, and we look at their net intake over the day, kids tend to have healthier diets. So it does tend to have an impact, you know, even if there is eating outside the school day, even if it's just the eating in the school day that gets healthier, it does make a difference in the long run. So it's kind of how it plays out.
And I guess I was just wondering, how does that, your statistics on kids eating healthier in the school day compare to schools who have the open campus lunch where kids are actually leaving?
You know, it's an interesting question because I've never seen the data drilled down that specifically to be able to say within those states with healthier standards, if we separate out schools with open campus versus schools without. So it's an interesting question that's certainly worth thinking about, because off the top of my head, I don't know data-wise, but to the extent that they do stay there for the day, you know, that I think focusing on how do we make those healthier options more attractive is ultimately going to be the most productive outcome, as opposed to kind of saying, oh, well, I know you like this better, so I'll serve that, you know, which is, again, kind of even if you think as parents, you know, kids would love for us to serve things that aren't as healthy on a regular basis. It's kind of part of our job to raise the bar and say, we're going to learn to like other things. So kind of putting that in the same context, it's how do we do it? How do we make this more appealing and then get it right? Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about the importance of nutrition in addition to the implementation of increasing choices. And so have you seen a lot of successes of school districts actually like institutionalizing an increase in food nutrition education through a school or district wellness committee or something like that, and that actually having an impact on health of the community?
Yeah, so the question is, in addition to sort of changing the school food environment, do we have examples of places where the wellness committee or someone has also institutionalized or put into policy a greater emphasis on nutrition education, those complementary education pieces, such that the total outcome was even better? It's an excellent question. I'm trying to think, you know, anecdotally, I know stories. I can't think of a quantitative analysis that's been done, particularly with comparing. You know, some of this research gets tricky because you'd have to find like District A and District B, and they did more ed and they didn't. So
yesterday on some of you might know the MMWR, CDC's, that was their announcement. They have that very information for King County and Seattle.
Oh, perfect.
And compared to all the other districts in the state, King County, the obesity rates went down, the nutrient intakes went up, and their income was stable.
Huh.
So yeah, it was just out.
Perfect. I was stuck in airport, so I'll have to check it out. But that's good to know. So the answer is, in case you didn't hear that if you look at MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly, which is an awful name, but it's CDC's publication, that the update just yesterday was on King County's success in Seattle, which is Seattle, Greater Seattle, Washington, and their success tied to the interventions they've done relative to the rest of the state. So there you go. Check it out. All right. I'm going to have to go back to the airport, where I'll probably be for the next several days. So if anybody needs me, just come on out. We'll have dinner. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you all for waiting around, and have a wonderful weekend.